Hello, this is Dale Cummins with Cummins Architecture and Design. Today we're going to talk about building a custom home, things to avoid, things to think about early on in the process. Some of the first things to look at are setbacks on the piece of property that you're looking at, particularly if this is a brand new custom home. Setbacks, the utilities on the property, make sure that you know where your hookups are, whether or not the property is going to be using a septic tank or sewer system, where water's available, whether there are curbs and gutters in place or not. Those are some of the basic things that you're going to want to know about your specific piece of property and some of the research that we'll do with you when you're developing a custom home. Specific things that we would like to work with on a property, including the views, the setbacks, the lot coverage. Those are the kind of things that we put together in the basic program to get started. Oh, it's important to know what's built next door, what it looks like next door, and how that's going to relate to your particular project. Building too far from the street can be an issue. We're working on a project right now that happens to have a 460-yard driveway that we're negotiating with the fire department because they want us to asphalt the entire drive, and the budget for that is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $60,000. If we can gravel it instead of putting asphalt in, we may be able to save the owner quite a bit of cost on that. So consider the distances that you're developing, and particularly if you have a large piece of property, and we'll go through that with you more in detail at some point. Fire department has a number of requirements, particularly building in the mountains with high fire zones. They want us to build with fire resistant materials, and now with new homes we'll be putting in fire sprinklers, at least in California. Some of the other things to look for are where the utility access hookup locations and what might be the local landscape requirements, particularly in those high fire zones. There are certain types of plants that they don't want you to use because they create too much fuel for a fire. So we take a look at that carefully. One of the other things to think about is, does your property that you're working with have a homeowners association? Because if it does, that's another round of review and comment. They will want to know what the exterior of the house is going to look like and how it compares to the other homes in the areas, materials. Sometimes they have things like they'll want to see rock or two types of materials, particularly on the front elevations. We like to, with a custom home, we like to make sure that all four elevations agree with each other, and we're not just building a facade on the front so that it looks great for the photographs but doesn't really look good for living in. So some of the other things to think about are unlicensed folks working on your project, or what they call owner-builder type of project. A lot of times we've seen situations where a contractor would ask the owner to pull the permit. It's called owner-builder. You are allowed to do that as the owner of the property. However, there's a few pitfalls that you want to be aware of. One is that if you do that, you need to pull what we call workers' compensation, in California, because that will cover you for your insurance, because the person that pulls the permit is responsible for those contractors or the work crew that's on the job site, even driving to and from. So heaven forbid somebody gets in an accident and you don't have workers' comp, that could be a real problem. So that's one of those pitfalls you want to avoid. We can talk to you about that more in detail as you get further along in your project. Another thing is that if you're working with a handyman, generally in California, the pricing that they're allowed to charge, I believe, is around $500 limit. You can check with your local building department, but handyman projects, they're not qualified to do larger scale projects unless they have a general contractor's license or a contractor's license that applies to the work that they're specifically doing. So it's very important to see that and make sure that the insurance is in place and that the licenses are appropriate for the project and the type of work that they're doing for you. Another thing to think about is if somebody implies that it's simple and it's really easy and quick to get done, that's kind of a red flag because there's a lot of steps and a lot of processes to go through. We recommend that you have a full, complete set of drawings that represent the work that you want to do on your property, because that is a document that you will be providing to the contractor for him to do the work and actually define the scope of work on a project. Another thing to keep in mind is being careful not to over design or to design yourself out of your budget. Okay, look at the drawings early, identify what's going on, look at where the light switches are, the layout, the door layouts, things like that. Well, and we'll go over those with you, but it's very important to get that down on paper the way you really want it, so you're not changing those kinds of things. You're not changing the window locations, you're not changing the outlets and the light switches while framing is going up, because it costs you a lot more money. So the right time to look at that is in the design phase, and then review it in the construction document phase and make sure it has the layouts and the support and equipment and lighting and switching is where you want it before you start the contract. Also before you issue a contract for the work. So those are just some of the things to consider on your project, and we'd be happy to go in more detail with you when you talk to us. So hopefully we'll hear from you soon.